achieved.
So what I'm guessing here is the moral of the story is you don't go around just grabbing any chick's ass at a bar and not expecting to suffer the consequences. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. On this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 68, which will take place on June 6th. There's 6 main card predictions, which I'll get to in a moment. What I'm referring to with my little opening ramble is the incident. You've probably come across it somewhere. There was a fairly inebriated individual who thought he would grab a girl's ass walking into a bar. It just so happened that girl was with a group of girls that included UFC fighter Leslie Smith, who proceeded to get in his face. This idiot of, poor excuse for a man, spit in her face and took a swing at her. She consequently took him down and proceeded to light him up. And then I believe Heather Jo Clark actually got involved as well and nutted the individual and basically taught the guy a lesson to the point where he started crying for his mama, no less. So yeah, good on the girls, looking good. And for those individuals who think they can beat up female MMA fighters, that should be a lesson to you. Now heading into this card, I'm coming off a rough night. I went 5-7 at the UFC Brazil event. It was a pretty weak showing. I'm trying to start stringing together successful nights. Again, I changed things up a little bit for this card. Took a different approach. We'll see how things pan out. All of my preliminary breakdowns will be at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Also, the bet packs will be available for June. I think there's 4 events in June, so you can buy the bet packs in one big chunk if you want. And save some money, or you can, and I'll probably make a better deal for this one, or you can buy them individually. Either way, let's get to that first prediction. Our first of 6 main card fights takes place in the UFC Bantamweight division. The number 11th ranked Francisco "Cisco" Rivera, 10-4-0 with 1 no contest, takes on Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres with a record of 10 wins, 7 losses, and 1 no contest. Now, Rivera's coming off a pretty questionable defeat. He was looking extremely good against Uriah Faber, went into the second round, suffered an eye poke, struggled to defend himself, and eventually got caught in a submission, which is his 2nd straight loss overall. It's a pretty tough, because he was looking fairly good, pretty tough loss to swallow. For Caceres, he's also lost back-to-back fights, was submitted by Uriah Faber, and then was upset by Masanori Kanehara in kind of a tough fight where he was absolutely dominated despite being a heavy favorite coming into that. Both guys have been off for a little bit longer than normal. Caceres, a 9-month layoff, and Rivera just slightly shorter at 7 months overall. Physically, Bruce Leroy, 2 inches taller, 3 inch reach advantage. He's also 7 years younger than his opponent. Win totals, big ones. Obviously, Cisco, 7 wins by knockout. He's a power puncher. He has been submitted twice in his career, and he has 1 knockout loss, and he's 3-1 when fights go the distance. For Bruce Leroy, just a pair of wins by knockout, 5-5 in fights that end in submission, and 3-2 in decisions. Not exactly overwhelmingly strong numbers in any single category. For Rivera, he's primarily a kickboxer with obviously significant power. For Caceres, he's a striker, throws a lot of unorthodox techniques. He's a very good grappler, but unfortunately he has well below average wrestling. His takedown game is not that strong. For Rivera, he showed exceptionally good takedown defense against Faber. I think it's going to make it very difficult for Caceres to get his grappling skills involved in this matchup. Rivera throws hard punches, good kicking game as well. He can counter with success. If he gets in the inside, he really likes to rip hooks over the top and over the top and look to catch an opponent. And Caceres being a little bit taller, expecting to try that technique here. For Caceres, really elongated strikes, fights very long, good reach, but he tends to leave his head up a little bit against a power puncher like Rivera. That's something he has to watch out for. And as he does have the reach advantage here, and with the kicks he likes to throw, should try and keep Rivera on the outside. He does tend to throw in a lot of singles, which isn't overly encouraging. He doesn't set up his punches against Rivera, who's a very good striker. He's going to see a lot of that stuff coming and back off. Overall, Alex Caceres has had trouble with power. He got cracked by Kanehara in that matchup and really backed off. He was hurt. He was in survival mode. We saw similar issues against both Roland Delorme and Sergio Pettis, where he was in serious trouble because he got hurt in those fights. The X factor, though, is Caceres' grappling. Can he get involved? Does he have the wrestling to get the fight to the mat? I don't think he does. Rivera won't take him down, so that's not going to allow him to grapple and reverse, which we've seen him do in the past. He needs to be careful, though, if he does hurt Bruce Leroy, following him to the mat and getting in trouble that way. Cardio is a bit of a concern for Cisco, but he has seemed to clean things up a little bit. I still give Bruce Leroy a bit of an advantage there. He could outwork Rivera in the second half of the fight and kind of steal it if he does slow down. But I think Rivera's striking is going to be more impactful. I think he's going to back Caceres up with that power, repeatedly reject Caceres' grappling attempts, and my prediction is Francisco Rivera to defeat Bruce Leroy by decision. We stick with the bantamweights as Joe One Bad Mofo Soto, 15-3-0, battles Anthony El Toro Birchak with a current record of 11 wins and 2 losses. Now what we have here is a battle of a former Bellator champion, the first Bellator Bellator bantamweight champion, taking him for the former MFC champion, Maximum Fighting Championships. Now, the fight was a Maximum Fighting Championships or Challenge? I can't remember off the top of my head. And this fight was originally set to go down at UFC 177, but when Abreu pulled out, Joe Soto was given the opportunity to fight the title. Obviously, you take it, and Birchak was pulled off the card altogether. Soto lost in a the fifth round via knockout against TJ Dillashaw. Made a good account for himself. Obviously, he didn't threaten Dillashaw that much, but he certainly held himself in there. And, considering the circumstances, it was a positive situation for him. For Birchak, he's coming up a 64-second loss to Ian Entwistle, which was his official debut after the first one scratched. He got caught in Entwistle's signature leg lock and put away. Now, Soto comes into this fight kind of an interesting predicament. He's already fought for the title and lost in his debut. Is there going to be a letdown here? Does he look at it as a kind of a wash, saying, obviously I got that opportunity way too early as far as my UFC's career is concerned, and now I need to start rebuilding to get that opportunity again? It probably is worth noting that originally when I picked this fight at UFC 177, I picked Birchak in my original prediction. Will it hold true? Let's find out, I guess. Both have big submission numbers. Birchak 6 of 11 wins by submission. Soto 8 of 15 wins by sub. Soto is a BJJ purple belt, comes from a collegiate wrestling background, versus Birchak, who's also a BJJ purple belt. He comes from a Greco-Roman wrestling background. So both guys have, good grappling pedigrees to build on here. Both guys are capable of scoring knockouts. Soto 5 wins by knockout, Birchak 3, but obviously not their strongest aspect of their game. Birchak, for the most part, tends to be very aggressive, both in striking and grappling. It can result in dominant performances where he simply trucks his opponent over, but can also cost him defensively and positionally. For example, the leg lock defeat in his last fight came from when he was on top position, tried to jump guard or past his opponent's guard, got caught in butterflies, and then eventually, boom, flipped over, caught in a leg lock that he defended against for a bit and then eventually succumbed to. For Soto, he's a much more patient fighter. Looks for openings in the feet. He will bait his opponent in and change levels for a takedown. He does something I really don't like, though. At times, he will shell up when he's under attack, look to survive and reset and then re-engage. That can create opportunities for his opponent to really push the pace and overwhelm him, at least score points to the judges if he doesn't do a lot of damage with the actual attack. But Soto does have a solid top game. He will look for submissions, but he doesn't make those big mistakes that Birchak does. I think the title fight opportunity was a massive experience gain for Soto. He almost won 5 full rounds with the champion and held his own in that matchup. I think Soto capitalizes on Birchak's mistakes, lands some strikes in the striking category, baits him in, scores some takedowns, gains some dominant positions. I think Soto eventually sets up a submission, and my prediction is Joe Soto to defeat Anthony Birchak by submission. We add 10 pounds, we move up to the featherweight division as Thiago Tavares, 23-5-1, battles undefeated Brian T. City Ortega with a current record of 9 wins and no losses. Now, this is Tavares' second fight as a featherweight. He submitted Robbie Peralta in his divisional debut. He's taken 10 months off since that matchup, so we'll see if, how that impacted him. For Ortega, he initially won his debut via a first-round submission. Unfortunately, it was turned no contest when he failed the drug test. He was also suspended for 9 months. He's been out of action for 11 months coming into this matchup, so both guys could be suffering from a little bit of ring rust. Now, a massive experience advantage for Tavares. 25 total fights to just 9 for Ortega. This is also Tavares' 16th fight in the UFC versus just the 2nd for Ortega. Physically, the American, 3 inches taller, 6-inch reach advantage. He's also 7 years younger, so those numbers all favor him. Ortega's a BJJ black belt, 4 wins by submission, technically 5 if you count the last fight. 3 of those 4 wins that actually count came by triangle choke, so certainly kind of a move of choice. For Tavares, 13 wins have come by submission, as he's a BJJ black belt. 3.47 takedowns at a 40% completion rate. Those are some pretty impressive numbers considering how many fights he's done it over. He looked very big in his debut against Robbie Peralta. If the cut goes well, his strength and size will be very tough for his opponent's 145 pounds to deal with, especially when you consider how capable a grappler he is. Now, in this fight, the grappling could cancel each other out, and it could lead to a fight predominantly contested on the feet. While Ortega's striking, last time we saw him in previous footage of that, his striking is still very much a work in progress. Obviously, he's had time to improve, but for the most part, his striking is set around building opportunities for his grappling. Pardon me. Ortega, in his last fight, he endured the early onslaught. Looked for a takedown tap, didn't get it, eventually moved to his opponent's back, took it while still standing, and locked in the rear naked choke for the finish. So again, his forte isn't striking. For Tavares, he has a very workable striking game. He's improved significantly. He has been knocked out 3 times, which leaves a little bit of question about his chin, but I don't see Ortega being a big knockout artist. Obviously, having none on the record indicates that he is not. I think Tavares should have the technical advantage when on the feet, and that will aid him significantly here. Tavares overall has rarely ever loses the takedown battle. 7 fights, his last 7 fights has not lost a takedown battle. You have to go back to his 2011 fight against Nick Lentz. Only twice in his UFC career he's ever given up more takedowns than he's landed, and that does not bode well for Ortega, whose wrestling game isn't that strong. He tries to land takedowns from the clinch mostly. As he took his last opponent's back standing, it's not a good technique as far as taking guys down when your wrestling game's not that good, and Tavares is as capable as he is on the ground. I think Tavares is too strong in close. He'll have the wrestling advantage. I expect to see him pushing Ortega into the cage, pulling his base. He likes to really pull those legs out and look for takedowns from that position. I can't see Ortega submitting him. He could grind a decision by simply being active if he can get top position, but that's going to be tough. Obviously, there's the opportunity for a knockout with Tavares' chin, but I just don't see that materializing either. So my prediction is Thiago Tavares to defeat Brian Ortega by decision. So those were kind of the appetizers. Now we're getting into the real meat and potatoes of this card, and we are in the UFC's lightweight division as Dustin the Diamond Poirier, 17-4-0, battles the Hawaiian Yancy Medeiros with a current record of 11-2-0 with 1 no contest. This is the second fight for Poirier in the UFC at lightweight. Obviously, he's fought there previously. He passed that first test with flying colors, a first-round knockout of Carlos Diego Ferreira in pretty impressive fashion. This is a pretty quick turnaround coming into this fight. 2 months since his last fight. He is from Louisiana where this event is taking place, so he will have the hometown advantage, and he wanted on this card. He was offered it pretty much as soon as he won that last matchup. For Medeiros, he has fought as high as middleweight. Obviously, we've talked about that's well documented. He's coming down to lightweight and has been there for a bit now. So we have those, a former middleweight taking on a former featherweight, so kind of an interesting clash of styles, and it really shows that how some, with Anthony Johnson doing what he's doing at light heavyweight, formerly a welterweight, it really shows how weight classes can be very interesting as far as what fighters, they can be liquid the way fighters move. Physically, 1-inch height advantage, 3-inch reach advantage for Medeiros. Poirier, though, surprisingly, is 2 years younger, which, considering how long he's been around, that's pretty impressive. For Yancy, he's adding a new layer to his attack, which I really like. He's coming into this fight with back-to-back submission wins. Both of them are very capable grapplers in Damon Jackson and Joe Proctor. Overall, he just has 3 submission wins, so it shows how he's kind of amped up his ground attack. He does have 6 wins by knockout. He's 2-0 in decisions. Where Poirier, 8 wins by knockout. He has 6 wins by sub, and he is 3-2 in decisions overall. Both guys have been submitted and knocked out once. Medeiros got knocked out by Rustam Havilov. Technically, it was just a thumb injury TKO that stopped that fight. It's not a true knockout. He was, though, submitted by Jim Miller. For Poirier, much more realistic, true to the word finishes, submitted by the Korean Zombie and knocked out, obviously, by Conor McGregor. Yancy training with the Medeiros the Diaz brothers, and you can really see it in his striking style and some of his mannerisms and demeanor in the cage, and it's only going to, increase the more time he spends with them. He has a nice long jab. He sets up his strikes with fakes, which I really like. Spinning kicks, which we'll see a little bit. He's a better kicker than the Diaz brothers. He will go to the body at times. He hurt Joe Proctor with a body kick well timed. He was also hurt in that matchup as well with a similar move. So, eventually his led to the finish. For Poirier, he looked very good against Diego Ferreira with his striking. He isn't an overly, unfortunately, Diego isn't an overly technical striker, so Poirier was going to look good in that matchup. What I did like from Dustin was the way he slipped punches and landed counters of his own in the holes that Ferreira was leaving him. He has a solid striking game, good power. But the big question is Poirier's chin. He only has been knocked out once by Conor, but he's been rocked in several fights and by guys like Jonathan Brookins, who aren't known for having massive power. Both guys have high output rates and give up roughly the same amount of strikes. The big differential, again, could be the chin. Medeiros seems to have a better chin. I could see Poirier looking to take this fight to the mat. He should have the advantage if he can get it there, but Medeiros is improving with his grappling skills, and his takedown defense is pretty solid. Poirier's wrestling game hasn't produced big numbers, and I said the size and overall technique improvement of Medeiros could make it difficult for him to take him there. And I think Poirier's going to look to try and be impressive and look for that big knockout. I think he'll be amped up at home. I think that actually is going to work against him. I think he'll make some mistakes, and that's going to be an issue. I'm looking for Medeiros to land something significant, and my prediction is Yancy Medeiros to defeat Dustin Poirier by knockout. We climb the scale significantly for our co-main event of the night. We move on to the big boys. The heavyweights is the number 9th ranked Big Ben Rothwell, 34-9-0, battles meathead Matt Mitrione with a record of 9-3-0, and he is currently ranked as the number 13th heavyweight in the UFC. Now, both men are enjoying career resurgences a little bit. Rothwell 3-1 in his last 4 fights with 3 wins by knockout. Alistair Overeem, Brandon Vera, and Brendan Schaub. So a nice set of names there. For Mitrione, he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights, knocking out Gabriel Gonzaga, Derrick Lewis, Shawn Jordan, and Philip DeFries. So, pretty impressive. So all 7 of their combined wins on their current streak have come by knockout. Both guys actually have a couple of comparable opponents they fought in recent memory. Both guys fought Gabriel Gonzaga with Mitrione winning by knockout and Ben Rothwell losing by submission. They also both fought Brendan Schaub with Ben Rothwell winning by knockout, and Matt Mitrione getting submitted. So MMA math, this fight will end in a draw? I don't know. My head just exploded. Either way, the winner of this fight gets a kind of a big push up the ladder and will get an opportunity to fight some guy ahead of him. Physically, Rothwell 1 inch taller. Mitrione will have a 1 inch reach advantage. Both men come in at close to 265 pounds. They're very big individuals. And here's an interesting stat for you. Probably wouldn't get this initially by looking at it. Rothwell, despite his massive experience advantage, 3 years younger than Mitrione, obviously, who had his football career before this. And I said the massive experience advantage, Rothwell, 43 pro fights, just 12 for Mitrione, 12 all coming under the UFC banner. Now, 8 of Mitrione's 9 wins have come by knockout. Rothwell, 20 wins by knockout, so these guys have power and know how to put guys away. Rothwell, something he's not known for, 11 wins by submission. We really haven't seen a lot of that lately, and he is 3-3 in fights that go the distance. Rothwell has been knocked out 4 times in his career, compared to just once for Mitrione, who got stopped by Roy Nelson. But we've seen Rothwell take an incredible amount of damage. The guy's got rocks in his head. He's able to, he's got a very, very good chin, and that could be significant here. Overall, neither guy has shown significant focus on using wrestling. I would say Ben of the two would be the more likely to look for a takedown. I think actually he'll focus on maybe some clinch work and pinning Mitrione on the cage, looking to do some damage there. On the feet, though, Rothwell really likes to close the distance, and he throws in 2, 3, and sometimes 4-punch flurries. Really, come in and just unload, and uses that power and his length to really put it on his opponent. Then he backs up and kind of resets. Against Alistair Overeem, he was countering every time Overeem came in, and he was throwing a really nasty uppercut, which he eventually caught him with and put him down. And that's actually something that Roy Nelson knocked out Mitrione with, was that uppercut. So that's something that Matt could be vulnerable to when he comes forward. We did see Rothwell when he fought Brandon Vera. He was getting cracked a couple times when he came in, and getting outpointed early on as Vera was being the busier fighter, but eventually Rothwell kind of picked up the pace. Not a lot of leg kicks out of Rothwell. He does throw them a little bit with awkward technique, and that's something that Matt Mitrione, like Brandon Vera, could look to capitalize on and really work that angle of his striking attack. But for Rothwell to be successful here, he needs to be aggressive, cut off the cage, don't back up. Be the aggressor. He is able to take damage, as I said. Keep coming forward, be the aggressor, and kind of discourage Matt Mitrione by taking his best shot and continually pushing the action. For Mitrione, lots of footwork, which is something Brandon Vera tried against Rothwell. Matt's very fast, light on his feet, but Rothwell does a nice job of cutting off the cage and staying in a guy's face, despite the fact that for Vera he was able to move all over the cage. We did see Mitrione struggle a little bit with Gabriel Gonzaga. When Gonzaga would come in and engage, Matt was getting cracked with a couple of shots. That's similar to the Jordan fight. Jordan had a lot of success in that first round by moving in, attacking, and moving out. That's something I expect to see Rothwell do here. When Mitrione knocked out Gonzaga, it was with a quick counter strike, which is pretty solid. Again, his speed is above average for heavyweights and catches a lot of guys off guard. Mitrione should have the athletic advantage overall, but Rothwell's really cleaned up his cardio and moves much better than he used to. He's not the slow-plodding heavyweight. He's a little bit lighter on his feet than you would expect. I don't think Mitrione will respond well to being backed up here. I've been impressed with him late, but he's been able to bully opponents. I don't think it'll be the case here. I think we're going to see Rothwell cut off the cage very effectively, kind of impose that size and strength that he likes to throw on guys, even though Matt's a massive individual as well. But if Rothwell can keep him backing up, I don't think Mitrione is the same striker. I think Rothwell's going to catch him with something during exchange, possibly a counter strike, and my prediction is Ben Rothwell to knock out Matt Mitrione and obviously pick up the win via that fashion. That was said very awkwardly. Rothwell defeats Matt Mitrione by knockout. We move now to the main event of the evening, and we're in the UFC's middleweight division as the number 13th ranked Tim the Barbarian Boetsch, 18-8-0, battles longtime veteran and legend Dan Henderson with a current record of 30 wins and 13 losses. Henderson, he keeps coming back. When is enough enough? I don't know. Is this fight going to be enough? Obviously, if he wins, certainly he will. I would think he'll stick around. He has just one win in his last 6 appearances, which was a come-from-behind win over Shogun, who where he nearly got knocked out in that matchup. On his current slump, he's been knocked out twice and submitted once, accounting for his last 3 losses, so certainly finishes that weren't showing up on his record earlier in his career are starting to materialize now. Now, Tim Boetsch, not exactly lighting the world on fire either. He's coming off a tough loss against Talis Leites, where he was the underdog. He fared very well in the opening round, was looking quite good, eventually got submitted. He only has 2 wins of his own in his last 6 fights, which were a come-from-behind win over Brad Tavares, where he was clearly losing, and a controversial decision win over CB Doll, which many people feel was a loss and should have been a loss. If you want to toss in a pair of controversial wins over Hector Lombard, I guess not. Hector Lombard's decision win was a controversial one, and he had to come from behind third round over Yushin Okami, where, that's basically over his last 8 fights. He really has not looked good, despite having 4 victories in that time span. Physically, 1-inch height advantage for Boetsch. Guys have the same reach, but Tim is 11 years younger, and Henderson almost 45 years of age, returning 45 in August, is a very old man to be fighting at this level. and we'll talk about that in a moment. Boetsch, 8 wins by knockout. He's 5-3 in fights that end in both submission and decision, and he has been knocked out twice in his career. For Henderson, 14 wins by knockout. He has been knocked out twice by Giagos, Mousasi, and Vitor Belfort. He is 2-4 in fights that are ended by submission, and 14-7 when he goes the distance. Henderson, we know what his hack is all about. It's the H-bomb. It's all about that power and landing that big strike. But he needs to set it up, and that's where he struggles a lot, chasing opponents and not landing. When he is being effective, he uses a little bit of a jab to try and set it up. Also, sometimes uses a little bit of an inside low kick. That's just basically a, hey, look it down here while I punch you really hard in the face type maneuver, but it's better than doing nothing. Unfortunately, especially now that he's getting on and his speed is costing him, his knee injuries seem to be piling up, more often than not, he simply goes head hunting with that right hand cocked. If, he can't usually land it, and it's quite unproductive, but if he does land it, boy, look out. Boetsch overall, though, is the more diversified striker. I really like his kicking game, especially that teep he likes to stick in his opponent's face and really hold them back. The more traditional kicks as well can be effective. And he throws hard combinations. He can do a lot of damage in the clinch, short range, and he only needs one strike. We've seen that one big strike against Tavares and against Okami. He can turn a fight on its head. Both guys have striking exchange rates that are almost even. Unfortunately, it's not as good for Dan Henderson simply because his chin is no longer what it used to be. He's been knocked out twice, hurt in the Shogun fight. It's quite apparent that his chin is certainly gone. Both come from wrestling backgrounds as well. Both average under 2 takedowns per fight, so it doesn't seem to be something they focus on. I would give Henderson obviously the advantage there, but again, being 45 years of age, 11 years younger, the skill and the background and the pedigree, that sometimes goes that will go out the window. But again, I expect both men to focus mainly on striking. Henderson could look to change it up based on his recent struggles, but I think he seems content to attack with his striking repertoire. The big thing is, of course, Dan is off TRT. We've seen what that did to Bigfoot Silva. We saw what that did to Vitor Belfort. And the last couple of Dan Henderson fights, he's simply not the same fighter. It showed what the impact of it was on him when he was on it, and now that he's off it, how big that is, inhibiting his stride, showing what he's truly capable of 45 years of age. It's very difficult to be competitive at the top level of competition. Boetsch is hittable, though, and that's something to keep in mind. But he's very durable. He's able to take a shot to give one. He doesn't have the best cardio as well, keep that in mind, but it should hold up better than Henderson's if this fight goes into rounds 2, 3, 4, and 5. And he's very strong. And I know Henderson as well, but I think Boetsch simply is stronger at this point in his career. If Dan can hit him, he could knock him out. And I'm not saying that, and we've seen Dan rally back before, but Boetsch, I think his power and his ability to land a strike here or there, whether, set it up with his kicks and land something, maybe in the clinch, catch him on a break, is going to eventually crack Dan's chin. And my prediction is Tim Boetsch to defeat Dan Henderson by knockout. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 68. As always, my preliminary predictions, and I'll say it slow, my preliminary predictions are available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. I'm going to see if I can get World Series of Fighting, and I believe Bellator's got an event coming up as well. Get those predictions posted on my website. I'll talk to my writers, make sure they're on top of things. It's just a whirlwind right now. We've got a ton of fight action. I'm doing my best to get the bet packs kicked out and the predictions kicked out and available. Again, it's very difficult to keep up at times because there is so much action, and there's not a break till the end of June, and then we run into that ridiculous July schedule. I think there's, 4 fights in the span of a week? 4 cards? That's ridiculous. I'm going to be exhausted trying to keep up, and I'll probably have to do some very short predictions. Either way, as always, thank you for tuning in, guys, and I appreciate all your comments and your positive energy that you're sending my way, and I will keep picking fights as to who's going to punch who in the face better or submit who until I don't want to do it anymore, which, hey, that could be on the horizon. You never know. Take care, guys.